October 14th Criminal Justice Meeting, and we'll call this to order. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Brown.
Present.
Carter.
Present.
Harris.
Present.
Herr.
Present.
Rodriguez.
Present.
Vice Chairman Little.
Present.
Chairman Vieira. We have a quorum.
Good. Mr. Brown, Dr. Brown, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Please all rise, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we get to the presentation items, I'd like to welcome two new members to the Criminal Justice Commission, Jen Herr and Lisa Rodriguez. Thank you for joining us, and your input's going to be well welcomed. So, we have a presentation this morning by Tarzana Treatment Center. Ladies, would you like to approach the podium? State your names.
Well, we would like to thank you for letting us present for you guys today. I'm a little sick, so I'm going to try to stay away from the mic. We're health educators from Tarzana Treatment Center. My name is Andrea Ramirez.
Ruth Morales.
And Jennifer Galarzi.
We are funded by SAPC, or Substance Abuse Prevention Control Grant, and we're also here for AVAPC, which is Antelope Valley Alcohol Prevention Coalition. I know it's a little bit of a mouthful, but our purpose is to prevent underage drinking within the city of Lancaster and Palmdale, or Antelope Valley. So we're going to be going through our 8-step process. It's a voluntary process we have the local retailers conduct with us. It's called the Retail Framework. So as you can see, we have the 8 steps posted up here. The team and I were actually going to be splitting up some of the steps. So for the first step, we call it the pseudo decoy buy. We don't personally conduct this step, but our partners in Tarzana Treatment Center in the Valley come out here, and they're all over the age of 21, and they go into the local retailers and they try to purchase alcohol. So out of the 45 stores they actually went into, 19 of them did not check ID. So we actually see that there is a need for some assistance here in the Antelope Valley. For the next step, we call it the sticker shock. And this is actually where us 3 go in there and introduce ourselves to the retailers, what we do, what we expect them to do, and how we're going to go about it. So if they seem in compliance or understand what we're going for, we actually ask them if they could post these stickers on their coolers. So we have them in both English and Spanish, and then from there we continue on to our next few steps.
So step 3 is a knock and talk. In this step, it's an 8-question survey that we survey the retailers and neighborhood businesses. Some of the questions that we ask are based on how often do youth purchase alcohol, how often do they see a record of stealing alcohol, if there's intoxicated people in or around the store, and there's any loitering. So what's interesting about this step is we compare what the retailers provide, the information they provide us, and then the neighborhood businesses. Usually they're different on retailers say, no, it never happens, usually doesn't happen, and then neighborhood businesses state that it does happen and there is a problem within these questions. The next step is the merchant assessment. This is an observing how liquor stores in the community display, market, and sell alcohol. We go in and assess the interior and exterior of the liquor stores. We observe on how many coolers are specifically for alcoholic drinks, if the alcoholic drinks are mixed with non-alcoholic drinks, the security of the location, is there cameras, also their signage based on no loitering, open containers, and if they check ID. The 5th step is the responsible beverage service training. This is an ongoing training that we conduct quarterly. We train on-sales and off-sale establishments that have alcohol license, and it's both English and Spanish. This training is approved by the ABC department. Some of the topics that we address are ABC retail operation standards, how to detect fake ID using the flag system, and laws and regulations within the city. Some of the liquor stores here in Lancaster have this under the conditional use permit, but some don't. So what we're trying to work is have them all up to date so they can be compliant and have this training within the city of Lancaster. Okay.
Okay, so step 6 is the follow-up. We just finished with this step. This is a merchant assessment and in-store attempt to purchase log, which is a self-report tool. The merchant assessment and purchase log allows the retailers to tell their story. So we give them a clipboard and a tally sheet. So they tally and mark when they feel that and someone underage has attempted to purchase alcohol. So they don't have to give us any information like, okay, we sold them alcohol or anything like that. They just have to check off if they think or suspect that someone underage has attempted to purchase alcohol. So we visit the retail outlet once after the initial drop-off, just to make sure they don't have any questions. And then after that, we come back 2 weeks later and collect those clipboards from them, and just for our surveys and data, we just, see how many outlets feel that underage drinkers have attempted to purchase alcohol. So that's step 6, and we actually just finished with that, so we're about to begin with step 7. Step 7 is merchant committed. So the merchant committed step will allow retailers to adopt a citywide merchant code of conduct, and there's 3 levels within the merchant committed. The first level of merchant committed is that all employees working at the store will be RBS trained. So if all the employees there are RBS trained, they will be a level 1 of merchant committed, and we will recognize them for that. Level 2 would be that they have all their employees RBS trained, and that they create an in-house policy to ensure all of the outlets and all of their employees are RBS trained. So that means that they'll have kind of like their own little set policy within their store that they are going to have these employees RBS trained. Removing all youth-targeted promotions, ensuring that there is 33% of signage in the windows, moving alcohol away from exits, groceries, and non-alcoholic beverages, ensuring that no alcohol is placed in front of refrigerator cases, and posting We ID signs, which we do provide them with. So if they have all of that, they'll be at level 2. Level 3 of merchant committed will include a whole store makeover. So with that, in addition to having level 1 and 2, the merchants will remove all alcohol ads from the storefront, remove all alcohol ads from inside the store, and receive merchant committed promos to replace alcohol. So that's kind of, we want to work with the city to actually have these alcohol outlets possibly recognized if they do complete any of these levels. So the next step after that would be policy development. So we would like to identify policies that address where and how alcohol is sold, displayed, and marketed. So right now, we're actually working on identifying schools that are in close proximity to alcohol outlets and seeing how that is affecting our youth. So we are collecting data regarding this right now, so we'll be back with more data regarding this. So those are all of our 8 steps that we do with the retailers. If anyone would like to become a member of our Antelope Valley Alcohol Prevention Coalition, we have some flyers and brochures on the back table. And thank you guys for your time.
Well, thank you. Any questions from the commissioners?
I do. I have a question. Do you have any data on how these steps are working? I'm especially curious about step 7, the merchant commitment. What kind of reception do you get from the merchants on that step?
Well, we haven't actually we're about to start with that step right now.
Well, I'm speaking some data from maybe some other area that's done this program.
Well, San Fernando Valley, they're actually, they've completed all of the steps because we get a lot of our information from them, and they feel like they have received a lot of good, responses from the outlets. We do have our own data with steps 1 through 6, so we put all that data together. We have our analysts do that for us. We have with Lancaster and Palmdale.
And this is periodically, you do this periodically to compare data points?
Yes. As soon as we finish a step, we have all the information analyzed.
And do you see the trend? Is it trending positively? Are you able to see in your data that you're preventing youth from having access to alcohol?
What we actually we're trying to work with, we've been speaking with Mr. Dorico about, is having that RBS really enforced, because that's a lot of the retailers are like, well, why do we have to do this training? It's not in our CUP.
Right.
They're not really familiar with their conditional use permit.
And we found that one to be the main focus for our 8 steps, because the other ones seem to be somewhat receptive, but for that step, it seems to kind of catch them, to kind of want to join in our efforts.
Okay.
Is, obviously, you're following the same footsteps as ABC to a certain point as far as checking
Right.
and double checking. Is there a possibility of inputting that as an issue to putting it into some type of ordinance that says that any retailer that wants to sell beer and wine and alcoholic beverages could be, okay, we got it, so perfect,
It's in the ordinance we'll be discussing in probably about 5 minutes or so.
perfect. Right,
We're ahead of it.
ahead, so fantastic, great job. Any other
Just-
question?
Just a comment, okay, they've been working diligently with us as we went through this social host ordinance process, okay, and sharing information, and these folks have been working very hard, okay, on pushing this through and working closely with us, and I think it's been a good relationship we've developed here in discussing issues as it relates to our community, and we're looking forward to continue to work with them on this
And
issue.
speaking of the social ordinance that we worked on, I know it's early, but do you have any data on how that may be benefiting your cause?
On hand, no, but we will.
Okay.
Have data out that, yeah, it
And
is
I-
early in the game.
I know it's been.
Sidebar to that, I'll be bringing information to you because we have no meeting in November, but for December.
Okay.
As it relates to that, because Captain Nelson has already issued those, his party cars on the weekends that we supplement and out there for those specific issue, and those are being addressed. So the
Outstanding.
deputy's been provided that.
Thank you, I look forward to it.
How are you funding?
SAPC, the Substance Abuse and Prevention Control.
Fantastic, great program. Thank you. Any other questions?
Hi. For the training, is there going to be a fee for the training that they're going to have to pay? And where would that be coming from?
It's free, the RBS training. We actually provide that training at our facility. We're going to see if maybe we could have something more official here in the city of Lancaster, but it's free. We offer it for 4 hours. They get a certificate for it, and we offer it to all the off-sale retailers, even on-sale also.
Yeah.
We offer it to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for your efforts and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Moving on, public business from before agendized items. Citizens would like to address the criminal justice on the agendized items, may do so when being considered by the commission. Please complete a speaker card and identify on the agenda item you would like to discuss. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Moving on to the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? We do. And obviously, we're going to have to push those off because we don't have a quorum on that. So we'll move that to the next meeting in December, I believe, right, Brett? Okay. Continued business. Lancaster Municipal Court. Jocelyn.
Thank you very much. We provided you with a draft late last week of our proposed revisions and updates to the business license chapter, Article 1, that's Chapter 5.04 of the Municipal Code. Article 1 is the general business license regulations. We've also proposed moving over Article 5, that's the violations and penalties provisions, into Article 1. Did that for a couple of reasons. There are some provisions in other articles having to do with vendors and peddlers and secondhand purchasing and so forth that we'd like to update, but just didn't have an opportunity to get to that. And the business license general provisions are important enough. We're seeing that we're having issues with some renewals lately, so that we wanted to get this in front of you sooner rather than later. You have a marked-up copy, a redlined copy, and I provided you this morning a clean copy that has some yellow highlights. Those are the new provisions that we're thinking we might want to particularly discuss this morning. We definitely want your input on it, and any suggestions you have for changing or revising those otherwise. So if we can just go through some of those. You can see that in Section 5.04.030, we've come across some issues where applicants are not the property owner of the location where they're intending to conduct business, and it is not clear whether the property owner is aware of and approves of the type of business that's going to be conducted. So we're suggesting that we authorize the Finance Department to request a copy of a lease or a rental agreement or some other documentation that establishes that the owner is aware of and is okay with the kind of business proposed to be conducted. So any comments on that would be greatly appreciated. In section, do you want to go one at a time, Vice Chairman?
Whatever you'd
Whatever
like.
works for you.
Does anybody have any comments on that one there as far as producing some type of lease or agreement? I know that sometimes producing a lease agreement prior to knowing if the individual can do so from a tenant, and we have a lot of property owners that live out of the area. And sometimes producing a lease prior to an agreement is somewhat difficult at times.
According to ABC, and there's somebody who applied, the alcohol license to state, they have to provide with this lease contract to them. So I don't know, something we want to add it to that, or?
Well, ABC, I understand that. Yeah, I think it's with some of the other ones, I think under the conditions that, and some of the things that are recommended as far as those locations, it could be sometimes an issue. No. Just my opinion on it.
I think that would just be an extension on their part to their
An
business
extension on
license
their
application.
Extension on their part to move forward and do their due diligence and find out, yes. And like all of us do, and a lot of times that have businesses and things like that, the first thing that particularly I say to them is, do your due diligence, go to the city and find out if that's possible for you to do something like that. So,
Right.
yeah.
And I think the provision does cover the city as far as liability is concerned.
Perfect.
Okay, section 5.04.050 addresses additional requirements for certain business applications. We do reference 3 types of businesses that currently require the criminal background check, and that's massage establishments, towing operations, and taxi cab operations. Staff is proposing that we include smoke shop and tobacco shops, hookah lounges, and liquor stores, mini-marts, and convenience markets as defined in Title 17 of the code, as requiring an annual live scan criminal background check. Those have been businesses that we've had some trouble with in recent years that have required additional law enforcement resources, and we've had some licensing issues and some operational issues. So it's one suggestion is to require some kind of an additional criminal background check. I know that we've had some discussion about that in previous meetings. We would really appreciate additional comments and fleshing out what you would really like for us to do with that.
Just one question, was internet lounges considered under this provision?
Yeah, it's an issue we're having right now. Okay, we currently have an issue locally that we're dealing with as it relates to that, because the internet cafes in the past have turned into a gambling
Absolutely.
type situation. I think this goes back to the earlier discussion too, is the fact that knowing that the property owner, they kind of interrelate, knows what type of business is actually being conducted there and what the license is applied to. All these suggestions here from the city, from the staff standpoint, is because of issues we've had as it relates to certain businesses and other type of activity that's taken place there. Specifically as it relates to smoke and tobacco shop. We have an issue where we had a significant case that was managed out of one, and it's like we get different buyers, and maybe in a straw buyer type situation, they just want to roll another person in, and open the business somewhere else. So it's trying to get in front of that type of behavior, where it's almost a well-thought-out plan to have someone in place who's not the actual business owner, but represents themselves as the business owner. So something that we've been doing is meeting with these individuals as they apply for licenses, just to kind of get a general feel of what type of person, how they actually came into place in the business, that type of thing.
We could certainly include internet lounges. Actually, we've had discussion about internet lounges. It is an ongoing problem. It frankly, I think, just slipped our attention as we were putting this provision together. So whatever guidance you want to give us would be appreciated.
I'd like to recommend that we include internet lounges.
What ability do we have if, once this ordinance gets moved forward, that we have to add, delete, put together, if there's something else that follows suit? Can we address that at a later time to put more into that, Jocelyn? Can we do
We
that?
absolutely can, and what we've done the last year or so is we just call them cleanup ordinances, where we take various miscellaneous provisions throughout the code and clean them up, revise them, update them as might be needed, so we could always pick up some additional regulations as you see fit in a cleanup ordinance coming up
Right.
sometime next year.
Are we in agreeance on what Mr. Carter said as far as internet cafes, or is everyone kind of, Dr.
I
Bell?
have a little bit of a question. You guys chose not to put this in this draft. You must have thought about it, and there were reasons pro and con. Help me understand what the issue.
I wish I could say that we thought it out that clearly. I apologize. It really is just an omission. It absolutely should be included. I think we both feel that way. I think staff would feel the same way.
And the reason why internet cafes? I'm just kind of curious.
Well, I'm going to just speak plainly, because in the past, and is they've turned into a gambling site.
Okay.
And that's the purpose, and actually the Sheriff's Department, Captain Nelson's folks did a big case that they seized a significant amount of property, and that case moved forward. So that's what, and that was actually a 3-location involved situation where they were related. Okay, so again, not saying that that's occurring now at any location, but that's the tendency. That's been our experience here. So the idea of internet cafes from 10, 15 years ago, what the purpose of them were for now is not feasible. People can go to the library if they want to access the computer for free. So they've turned into gambling establishments.
So anytime you include a business in a regulatory item like this, you put a little bit of burden on them to do work that's essentially unfunded. In other words, you make it a little bit more difficult for them to do business. And the question might be, of our internet cafe population, how many of these are people that are doing things that we're concerned about, and how many of them this is completely irrelevant? In other words, are we putting obligations on 1,000 businesses because we're worried about 2 of them, or is it a pretty common event?
Well, of the 3 that existed, all 3 were involved in that activity.
3 for 3.
Again, now I know of 3 now that we haven't gone there yet, and if they're legitimate, they're legitimate. But the 3 of the 3 in the past, that's what was happening.
I would add that gambling is probably the least nefarious of the activities that can take place at those internet cafes also. I've read where, this is where some sexual predators will go to send out their correspondence.
Florida or not.
Good.
If you will look at subsection C of .050, this is actually addressing what the folks at Tarzana Treatment Center were discussing. New alcohol establishments in the city are subject to a CUP, and one of the requirements of the CUP is that they undergo responsible beverage server training. For pre-existing or pre-approved establishments, there is no such requirement because they're not subject to a CUP. So subsection C here is intended to bring everybody in under that umbrella so that every establishment that sells or serves alcohol has to ensure that the employees who serve or sell, in fact, undergo responsible beverage server training at least once every 3 years. They keep a list of those employees. They keep a list of a copy of the certification that's available for inspection for the ABC compliance officers and the deputy liaisons who conduct those investigations.
With the city of Lancaster being very strong and very right on as far as moving forward on the alcohol beverage issue, a business license comes up every year. And even though the established places have been grandfathered in or passed over, is there a way of instituting something like this into the ordinance that says we are pushing this program and we would like your people to be trained? We would like to have them checked off a list of items to do and make sure that as a condition for them to move forward as a business license, or is that too much to ask for?
Are you saying more of like from an orientation standpoint?
Correct.
As people make an application for that type of business, that we provide them information that tells them the requirements and the expectation for performing that type of business in the city of Lancaster?
Yes.
I think that's doable.
We could certainly do it, and as far as participating in the entire program that the treatment center is trying to put together, I don't know that we can mandate that they develop policies and so forth, but we could certainly include language that strongly encourages them to do so. We certainly could require that they undergo some preliminary orientation in conjunction with the triannual responsible server training. You give us the parameters, what you're looking for, and we can incorporate that, absolutely.
Thank you. What do you think sometimes? You think something like that could happen? Instituting something that would make it more, as far as a policy, putting it into something like that? When they're renewing their licensing type? Yeah. Yeah. When they're renewing their license. So, something to look at. Thank you, Jim.
Is that with provision C?
It is, but I read it too, but I'm just wondering because I'm thinking of the ones that have been
The ones that are exempted.
exempted from it. And, I mean, I heard the lady say how, and you brought up a great question, Sheldon, is that how receptive is the one's going to be? Wait a minute, we're doing so many things already. You're adding something else for us to do, and do we really need to do this? So obviously, the direction of the city's been very pro on what the direction they want to look at and see. And anything that would help curtail use, on this. Go ahead. Go ahead. Hit your mic, Jen.
I like the idea.
Jen.
I like the idea of bringing the businesses that have been exempted prior when they go to renew under this new ordinance.
I agree. I think it's one of those things that if it could be incorporated somehow, What do you think, Jen? Hit your mic then.
Every year, when they renew the business license, and we provide them RBS training.
Well, they would have to.
They have
provide
to?
proof.
Yeah. I know they used to have a program, I didn't know, it is funded by ABS. And I know they used to have at the sheriff's station and downstairs, and they invite a lot of business owners to compliance, their liquor license, or it's a more like an education program,
Right.
But are we talking similar to that?
We're talking this program that the ladies presented
Okay,
earlier.
all right. I think it's a pretty good idea. It is definitely
Well,
worth
I think that we're being governed by the ABC, and then the ladies with their program that they're proposing, and to move along, it's just something I see that businesses that have been there and been grandfathered in, I keep calling it grandfathered, I apologize, but they're exempt from this. How can we implement something to the city or make a recommendation that would say that when this licensing comes up, we would like to see certain changes made to your employees as far as training, follow-up, and this and that would make it a situation that would help deter selling beverages to use, or like the lady said, of the places we go to, how many people are checking IDs, how many people are doing this, and the training involved that takes place, and it comes from training. It just happens to be that way, so can something like that be instituted in a renewal process, that when somebody is looking at a business license renewal, can that be
I think we can make that recommendation today.
We
Have that
certainly can
included.
include that. We can get additional information from the folks at the center about some more specifics about those steps, and we can incorporate subsections for each of those things, or just require that they actively participate in that program. Again, I just want to throw it out there, the more requirements we build into the code, the more potential pushback we're all going to have. Not that that's a problem necessarily, but I just want to, make sure that we're all aware of that. Give me some sense of how much detail you want us to include in here, or do we just want to require them to develop some sort of policy to ensure that they are doing what they need to do to make sure that underage people are not buying?
I guess I could say is that we all hear in the stats that come to our commission red zones in the areas that are hot spots and this and that, and we look at those, and I don't want to sit there and pinpoint on those particular businesses at hand, but here recently in the paper we had a shooting at an incident which has been discussed by Mr. Rigo. Said it's an area they've been working on, and there's a liquor store, there's a bar established, there's a restaurant. Is there something that, what do we do to curtail that? What is this part of this? Can this be instituted and things like that, or are we shooting from the hip and say this is not really possible? I'm just looking at this thing and saying, these people are coming up for renewal on licenses, and we've had X amount of issues with this particular location. And with these particular issues that we're having with this location, we're finding that there should be implications put on you to do security, whatever it may be. And it might be another deterrent that would look at the businesses that we're having those problem areas at, and I hate to just think problem areas, but it should be overall all in range,
Would it be, just trying to synopsize what you're saying, is what you're looking for is standardization of the licensing process across the board?
Yes, and also helping the areas that we consider red zones and hotspots. I mean, the sheriff's department is going crazy trying to cover an area, and anybody knows the area that they cover, Captain, is incredible. What you do, and you do an incredible job. And it's being sitting on a couple boards and finding out what they do, and Mr. Driegel, incredible what you do. I just find it that implementing areas like this, and then we have other areas that are getting grandfathered in, but yet they're serving the same situation. And what can we do? We can talk to the property owner, we could talk to the business owner, we can tell them that we feel that they should do this and that, but what can we do to implement something that would say they're coming up for a renewal? And by coming up with a renewal, is there something there that we can sit there and say, well, by the way, because of this area and the issues that we've had in the past, it might be something we can look at.
Well, I think it's not different from a lot of other professions, even though you might be an individual business owner, but if you have to be recertified or recredentialed or, on any renewal, there's issues if you open an automotive business with registration with the Bureau of Automotive Repair and a whole process that you have to learn through the Department of Consumer Affairs. I think for me is, and the discussions that we've had as it relates to this is that, the focus is responsible service, right? The fact is that the state alcohol and beverage control people, truthfully, without the support of the city and the resources of the city and the sheriff's department, wouldn't even be able to operate within our community because of the lack of resources that they have for this. So it's more of, hey, we all have a responsibility as a community, and that's kind of think where we're going here is, and we want to create that incentive by compliance as well as fostering that through our business improvement programs or things to say, this is the responsible thing as a business owner that we're all responsible for in the community. This should not be that difficult if they can maintain the record and the people attend it, and especially it's free. So, and if we can make it as less intrusive on the business as possible by accommodating them in some way in a short period of time, that's the discussions that are ongoing. How do we create that incentive? And that's really, that's really where we're looking for direction as well, is we have some thoughts. We've discussed it amongst ourselves what those thoughts could be. Then also, as you represent members of the community and different parts of the community, what would work the best in a business situation?
And I'd also like to point out, we're just about to get to the next section that addresses conditions of approval. It's a new suggested provision that does allow the city to impose operational conditions on a particular business or a particular type of business if experience has shown us that there are problems associated with that business, or in the location where it is, or it's an area, it's a red zone, as you're talking about. So in addition to requiring specific for alcohol establishments the responsible server training, we can certainly incorporate some of the other sort of policy and follow-up procedures that the center is addressing. We can certainly put that into that section. And then that, coupled with your thoughts about imposing conditions or authority to impose conditions, that might, Vice Chairman, that might give us the tools that you're hoping that we can have without being too intrusive on businesses in general.
Okay. Anything? Let's move on, I guess, yeah.
Okay, so then the next section is the conditions of approval. I don't know whether you've had a chance to really glance through those subsections. The idea behind being able to impose conditions is if we looked at an application or an applicant and there were problems, or it's a renewal for a business and we've had perhaps some law enforcement issues there or so forth, rather than denying or revoking that license and shutting down a small business in the city, which we don't want to do, if we can determine that there are some conditions we can impose, for example, additional security requirements or what have you, that would allow that business to operate, but would be operated safely and in a manner that doesn't tap into additional resources. That's the idea behind this provision.
Any comments? Dr. Brown? If there's conditions put on a certain applicant or this and that and everything else, and that applicant has a chance to appeal or argue their point, it goes in front of city manager?
It could go in front of the city manager, but typically would probably go in front of an independent hearing officer, as other appeals would under this chapter. Yes, an applicant or a licensee for renewal who's had conditions imposed could either request a hearing to modify them, to remove them altogether, after they've been imposed, after a certain amount of time. If the cause for those conditions has been mitigated by the business owner, could come back in and request that those be removed altogether.
Would that ever go up to the city council level?
Currently, when we get to the appeal section, you'll see that we have it set up so that the appeal is heard before an independent hearing officer, and then the appellant does have the option to appeal before city council the hearing officer's decision if they're not happy with that decision. I think we'd like to have some discussion about that. I think we'd probably like to have some input, additional input from staff on that. Currently, that's the draft.
Thank you.
Okay, section .070 is denial, suspension, and revocation. The current chapter is pretty bare bones. I think the language is something to the effect of can be revoked or denied if there have been a violation of the provisions of the chapter. Well, the chapter's a little bit vague too, unfortunately. So we decided to survey some other cities and sort of brainstorm some of the grounds that we thought would make sense for denying or revoking. We've come up with a list of about 10 or 12 grounds for denial and revocation. I don't know if you've had a chance to look through those. We'd love to get your input on those.
I do have one question. Why 10 years?
Seemed like a reasonable amount of time, not too terribly long, but, 5 years is a little short. We do recognize that people can change and turn their lives around. We're all for that. We've met with a number of applicants who maybe should have been revoked under the code, but in talking with them, we see that they've sort of turned things around. That's why there's some discretion in the city manager's authority to deny or not deny, or to issue or not issue. 10 years just seemed reasonable to us. Again, whatever suggestions you might have, we'd absolutely be happy to incorporate.
I think in your last statement, you just answered my concern, was there is a mitigation process. There's some discretion in there. But along with that, is that process laid out in this ordinance or in some procedure so that it can be?
It's not in the ordinance itself. There is a new subsection further on in the ordinance that expressly authorizes the city manager to promulgate rules and regulations and policies to implement the provisions of the chapter. I think that I think it makes sense that those kinds of parameters for decision-making and so forth are more appropriately placed in a policy rather than codified in an ordinance. And we can certainly have discussion about what those parameters should be at a later meeting.
Would it be possible to have a statement maybe in this section that says, that talks to the city manager discretion and maybe a reference to that policy, so that when reading the ordinance, one can reference that to see what needs to be done or what actions they need to take in order to have some leniency on that 10-year requirement?
Absolutely, we could add another subsection after the itemized grounds for denial. We could have a subsection that expressly says the city manager shall consider mitigating circumstances, et cetera. We'll come up with some language and email that to you for your review before this moves in anywhere else.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the other items involved in this that have been penciled out?
No.
Appeal process.
So as I mentioned earlier, I believe, currently appeals, as written in the code, currently appeals of license decisions are held before City Council. However, 2 months ago or 3 months ago, I believe, City Council adopted a resolution to designate an independent hearing officer to hear business license-related appeals. So subsection C here is just codifying that rather than, just formally putting it into the code. Subsection, let me get my glasses on. Subsection H is where the proposed language is that a hearing officer's decision can be appealed before City Council. Again, we'd like to get your input. We'll get additional input from staff and management about that one. The language about the procedure for the appeal before a hearing officer is pretty standard. It's in the other ordinances that we've drafted and have adopted over the last couple of years. Informal proceedings, the rules of evidence don't apply. Everybody has an opportunity to testify, to bring witnesses, to produce other evidence that's relevant that may, make their case. Hearing officer has a certain number of days to make a decision, and it will be in writing. There are findings and then specific determinations. And then the appellant, it either goes to City Council if that's the way we're going to go, or they have the right to petition the court for a writ of mandate.
As far as the appeal process, is it the consensus that in case that applicant wants to appeal, that it would have the opportunity for its day in front of City Council? I mean, that is, or are we saying that once it could go either way? If they decide not to, then it goes to, and that decision is final? Or, because I do know the way the city seems to be, or applicants would always love to have their final say to the top level of the city, and that would be the city council. So, I mean, is it giving the opportunity for an applicant to get to that point, or is it just saying from a hearing officer and that decision's final?
As it's currently written, to exhaust your administrative remedies, you have the hearing officer hearing, and then you would go to city council and have a final hearing, and then you would have to go to court. Some of our, like the property maintenance ordinance, for example, there's the hearing officer, and that's your final administrative hearing. After that, you go automatically to court if you want to pursue it further. So this does build in the second level of review as it's currently written.
Okay, that's good. Great. Summary suspension. Where are we at there? Oh, informal procedure and resolution.
Okay, subsections 100 and 110 are entirely new. We've used these in other cities that I represented in the past, and we've had some conversation with San Jose and some other cities that have this kind of procedure. It's very rarely used, but when you have a situation that comes up unexpectedly that causes a real hazard, a law enforcement-related issue, for example, or some sort of a health and safety hazard, to have provisions that allow you to essentially immediately shut that business down while city and the business owner go through the process to take the steps necessary to make it safe, that's why these are here. Again, it would not be used on a regular basis at all, but it does allow for the city to stop something in its tracks if we see that there's a real safety issue, rather than having to go through the revocation process, which does add a pretty significant amount of time.
Any questions, comments? Mr. Carter, I can tell you're thinking.
It doesn't happen often, but this time
He's always thinking.
before a policy like this is, or an action like this is implemented, I'm just curious what the decision tree is. Is it city manager's discretion? Is there consult with other agencies, law enforcement, public safety, fire? What's the decision tree before this is implemented?
I can answer that. Obviously, it would come either through law enforcement, through our public safety department, or the city's attorney's office. We would gather up, find out what the real and imminent threat is, make a determination. We wouldn't be able to call a council meeting, but as is the practice when something like this comes up, I would call the mayor or contact the mayor and say, we're doing this, so he would be informed. And then I would contact the rest of the council immediately afterwards. But it would be on a real and imminent threat. If we knew there was a event that was going to occur that was going to result in some kind of harm or public safety issue.
Okay.
But we would consult people. It would not be just me making a decision without input and without informing council.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay. We got some feedback from the finance department about the language, the actual wording, and the timing of the term of the license in section 1.130, and the due date for the fee in section .150. It really is just technical in terms of when the clock starts and when it ends. So that language is going to be changed ever so slightly from what you have in your version now. Again, we can email the updated language to you. It doesn't change the substance of anything, but we did want to let you know that. And I think that's pretty much it as far as the substantive changes and updates that we're recommending.
Any further comments, concerns, input?
Just one more question. Dot 270 and dot 290, those are the ones that you addressed in the beginning, saying that you're moving these from 5 to 1?
Which one was that, Mr. Carr?
5.04.270 and 5.04.290. Violations and administrative citations, are those the ones that are moving to Article 1?
Yes, in fact, starting from, I think subsection .260 through the end, some of those are new provisions, but there's nothing really meaty about them, and it's just sort of put the enforcement stuff in with the general business license provisions. It just seemed to make more sense in terms of structure and organization.
All right, thank you.
So with that, obviously changes will be made, or some changes will be made, then come back to us again, or is it just going to be emailed to us? Because we have Dr. Vieira that's been out, Howard, and I don't know if there's anything else that they would comment, and 2 new people. So, I mean, we can move this thing forward, don't you think? Or what's your recommendation? Do I have one? Or concerns?
Does this require a motion? Does this, moving this forward, would that require a motion? Make a motion that we move the business license ordinance forward.
Do we want to modify with as far as changes, or any changes that were suggested, or different verbiage that maybe come back, or
With the changes that we suggested.
is that okay?
So
So
with,
okay.
so with the revisions that we've discussed here, we would email those to you, and in light of, given that that has been incorporated, you're recommending that it go to council?
Yes.
That is correct.
And we can certainly, before you finish the motion, we can certainly make those changes, get those emailed to you. Obviously, we'll email them to Chairman Vieira and Commissioner Harris as well, and get everybody's final input. If there is a problem as you see the revisions, we can always pull it back.
So should I restate the motion?
Restate the motion.
I move that the business license ordinance, upon inclusion of the recommendations and changes, acceptance of the recommendations and changes, be moved forward to the city council.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor? Vote. We all voted. It's passed. Thank you, Johnson. Thank you. That's a tough, and Lee, that's been, I can only imagine what you've been going through on this. Yeah.
Thank you very much. You've been extremely helpful. Your input and your comments over the last few months have been really invaluable, and I'm sure that, I think we're certain that City Council is going to appreciate the work that you've put into it as well. Thanks very much.
So I want to thank you. It seems to me, as I've watched you in action, that you have been taking an effort to try and make more concise and eliminate some of the excess in a lot of our statutes. And I've always worried that we have regulatory creep, meaning the rules and regulations and the laws continue to grow and they never seem to shrink. And it becomes more and more of a burden. So I think you're pushing back a little bit on that and trying to make things at least more understandable and concise. Thank you.
Great work. Thank you so much. Backing up a little bit, we're backing up, and the only reason why we're backing up a little bit, because I have a speaker card here from Mr. Rivas, Michael, and since we're backing up because it was your birthday, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Mr. Rivas.
I think you're supposed to vote after the public has comment on it. Is that correct? I want to commend the Planning Commission and Criminal Justice Commission and the city for stepping up on the problem of alcohol and drug abuse and smoking abuse in the city. You know, I've mentioned this before the council. You know, at one time I'd walk down 10th Street West in the evening to the council meetings or whatever's going on the boulevard. I won't do it anymore. Outside liquor stores, there's people hanging around, there's people fighting, people trying to hit you up with money. It's a scourge on the city, and I'm glad the city's stepping up. However, on this, it was a great presentation. I think it would have been an even better presentation if you had had current law and your proposals on the board for the public and the commissioners could see it, and we could comment. And I'm wondering, though, that if the Criminal Justice Commission is getting overlapping in the Planning Commission and some of these things, that's a concern. Before you okay it and send it to council, to put the fear of God in some of these people, I would send a notice out to every business in the city and say, the city's considering certain rules. These are the rules. This is a checklist. And what do you think about it? Let some of these businesses know what's coming down before you come down on them. Finally, is it really necessary that we have additional rules? Don't we have state law? Don't we have building and safety codes? Don't we have enforcement codes that we can use to handle some of these problems? You don't have to take my word for it. Just get in your car and drive around town. You know where the places are. You know what's going on. You know what these smoke shops are. They're not selling cigarettes. They're selling paraphernalia for drugs and everything else. So the bottom line is we have existing ordinances and laws that can take care of this. 2, do we let these people know what's going to come down before we come down on them? And 3, do we present this in comparison with existing law and proposals to make it more lucid for the public? Because we can sit up here and go through them all the time, and you can okay it, and you can send it to the council, and the public doesn't know, or anybody knows really how it compares to the old and the new. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rivas. Moving forward, our commission staff reports and updates reports. Sheriff Department, Josh.
Good morning. Good to see you, Mr. Herr, Mrs. Rodriguez. Congratulations. Crime Commission report for September 2015. Burglary suppression team made 15 felony arrests, 1 misdemeanor arrest. They made 1 felony warrant arrest, 4, 3 misdemeanor warrant arrests. They recovered 4 stolen vehicles, 7 Ramey warrants, 1 probation parole search, and they recovered $17,555 of stolen property, and they've solved 15 burglaries. The narcotics team, they made 9 felony arrests, 6 misdemeanor arrests. They seized 150.3 grams of methamphetamine powder, cocaine in grams, 571.8, and they conducted 7 search warrants and recovered 4 firearms. The land cap team made 45 felony arrests, 12 misdemeanor arrests, and they recovered 3 firearms, and estimated value of the illegal narcotics they seized was $83,157. Let me switch to the PowerPoints.
You're doing it all, Josh. Way to go. Good job.
All right, bear with me on this one. The comp stat for City of Lancaster for September 2015. Violent crimes, 125. 379 property crimes. Total Part 1 crimes, 504. Violent crime arrest was 99. 55 for property crime arrest. Total arrest, 154. Unique URNs issued, was 1,768. All that means, it was actually inquired yesterday, when it says unique earns issued, that's for every report that was issued, whether it was criminal, non-criminal, and it doesn't list all the charges. It's just for every report. Does that make sense? Year-to-year comparison for Part 1 crimes is actually a little bit higher. I know you can't read it. It says 504, and the bottom is 408, I believe, with a 24% increase. Most active reporting districts for Part 1 crime would be 1137 at 82, to 26 for 54, 35 for 51, 1121 for 44, and 1127 with 36. Hotspot areas, the dark red is where it's concentrated at, to dark orange, to medium orange, to yellow. As you can see, it's mostly concentrated kind of mid-city by Sarah Highway, which is the diagonal lane coming down, and then east side, which would be 10th East and 20th East, right around Avenue J, right where that Walmart is, if that gives you some scope. Residential burglaries, 1137 had 35, 1121, 11, 1135, 10, 1132, 10, and 1133, 6. The graph for residential burglaries, each red dot is a burglary and where it happened. So as you can see, again, if you look at the diagonal line, that's Sarah Highway, to give you a reference. Right in the middle is Lancaster Boulevard, and then concentrated mostly in the east side. Robberies for September 2015, 1127 had 7, 1137 had 5, 1126 had 5. 1127 had 7, and if you look, it's right around Valley Central Way. Robberies, again. Each dot represents where a robbery occurred. There's 21 dots. So for the next slide, oh, where'd it go? Yeah, robberies. There's only 17 here. There was 21 robberies, it only lists 17. That's only because in the other RDs, it was only one that occurred there. Does that make sense? Okay. Monthly trends. For homicides, we're right at the median for September. Rapes went down for the month of September. Robberies has gone up again in the month of September. Aggravated assaults, up in the month of September. Burglaries, up. Larceny thefts has gone down almost to the median for the month of September. Grand theft of vehicles has gone down. Arsons has significantly gone down, below the median. Part 1 crimes frequency by reporting district, again, dark red is concentrated, light green is good, or dark green is good. And that is the data sources that the crime analysis used to put the slideshow together.
Questions, comments?
I have a question. Do we have any hypotheses about why the sharp increase in violent crime for this reporting period?
I did ask around, AB 109, Prop 47, and then the leniency to do with juveniles. The turnaround from them going to Silmar and then getting released back onto the street, it's almost immediate. I mean, they get released before deputies even get down there or come back from Silmar. So it's just the leniency.
And just to comment on that, and that directly flies into information. We've been working closely with probation on a potential juvenile day reporting center here that's in the works right now. But in talking to them, right now, the juvenile halls are at 50% capacity. 50%, but they're still relying on the Christberg scale for retention. So even though they're at 50% capacity, they're not letting deputies place the holds on them. They're still following a scale that was put in place several years ago based on their full capacity. So in other words, even if the Sheriff's Department makes a recommendation based on an investigation for detention, we're still in that diversionary mode for all juveniles. So the significant number of, like you're seeing this issue with burglaries this month, most of those are probably juvenile related and talking to the Berg team. So this is an issue we're trying to work through with the Department of Probation based on issues we're having here. And again, we've talked about this a lot of times, right? In the diversion sites, and thousands of these things are being managed. We actually have, staff has created a very close relationship with the hearing officer who manages all the juvenile citations for the entire county, Mr. Jack Foray, who used to be one of our local commissioners. And he's been very helpful. So actually, I'm going to be bringing a presentation to you in December as it relates to this on-working relationship that we're developing with them. And that Juvenile Day Reporting Center is something I believe is very important for us here with having certain of those services, and there's a education component to it and all those things that I think will be really good.
Are we seeing the burglaries that committed by youth getting more brazen because they know that basically there's no punishment for them? Last night at the city council meeting, we heard a story from a 62-year-old lady that said in broad daylight, 1:30 in the afternoon, her door was getting kicked in.
That'd be a correct assumption, yes.
Thank you, Sacramento. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it. Great work. Our highway patrol's not here, so district attorney's not here. Mr. Dorico.
Yes, sir. Thank you, and welcome. Appreciate all the dialogue, too. That's been very helpful. I'm going to reiterate Jocelyn's feelings on that. One of the things I've enjoyed about in our commission meetings, especially with this current group of, as you as commissioners, has been the dialogue that we've been able to have openly here in public about issues and discussions. That gives us a place to go based on your recommendations. Big month. Christy Slayton, raise your hand. She's our new radio voice for Halloween safety this month. Just to comment on our outreach out there with our radio ads and things as it relates to Neighborhood Watch and some of the programs we're doing, but she did a great job for Halloween safety. First time, not like me, when I go to the radio station, they have to do it for 40 times to finally get it. But so that has been working really well for us. And if you've had a chance to go to the movies and see the Cinemark things we've put up, we actually, our traffic safety unit at the station put a program together for Cinemark as for safe driving for a month, and we actually watched it have some effect on our accident index, and especially as it related to tolerance levels for speed and things in the community. And that has been a focus. A couple city events that have gone by. If you had an opportunity to come to Streets of Lancaster, excellent event, and especially from a public safety standpoint, we had one incident that occurred, and it was on the peripheral. It was not related to the event. And one individual that had some issues with our park rangers that was handled appropriately. But other than that, nothing beyond that, other than a car caught on fire in a parking lot. That was kind of exciting for a minute, but that was about it. So other than that, it was a great event. I think we had, every year that event grows, and the participation of the community in it was excellent. The Parks Department did an excellent job, as well as having vendors out there. It was big time this time. And then Bark in the Park, which is Mark's favorite event of the year. No, I'm sorry. Yes, I got that wrong, clearly. Okay, but that was a great event as well, and that's community participation is very large at that event, and that has grown over the years as well. And obviously, no issues there. We've had nothing ever occur there. I think the big thing is the push for us for the next 2 months. What you'll see is we concentrated with those radio ads and our outreach in the community is holiday safety. So once again, the holiday safety plan will be in place with the Sheriff's Department once again for those from Thanksgiving through Christmas as it relates to our shopping centers, okay, which those extra patrols probably will have some impact on some of the things you're seeing here as far as our statistical data. Okay, out there as it relates to thefts and larcenies, which seem to be the issues that drive our numbers. I will tell you, we're having some issues. You know, it's a lot warmer than it typically is this time of year, and I think that's having some cause and effect as well as issues arise. Then For our December meeting, I would like to bring forward, as I provided, and I need to provide for our two new members, the California Attorney General's Office reports as it relates to statistical data. It's a lot, and I hope everyone's had an opportunity to look at that. What I'd really like to do is do a presentation on what that data represents to us for a period of time, and then that cause and effect as we're seeing as those issues arise in our community related to that. There's a lot of questions and things thrown out publicly as it relates to incarceration rates and all these issues, and I think it's a good discussion for us to have publicly here and have some input on enlightening the public, both here at the meetings and through the media, on what those issues have been for some time. So that's one. Secondly, I'd like, because I'm going to hog the mic on December, okay? Jocelyn hog the mic tonight. The Sheriff's Department hog the mic. The Tarzana ladies really hog the mic for a long time. Okay, I'm taking the mic for December. I'd like to bring you an update on our anti-truancy program at Antelope Valley High School. We've, had a great learning period of time. Now into this year, we're seeing some tremendous improvement and numbers that we're pretty proud of, and honestly, I was very surprised the effect it's having. So I want to bring a report from that along with Dr. Vieira, and just to discuss some of the things we changed our strategies and the effect that's had. That's all I have.
Mr. Draco, thank you as usual.
I'd like to say something.
Go ahead.
I'd like to say a thank you to public safety, to the staff in general, for the events that the city gets to put on, from the city council, city manager's office, public safety, everybody, because the events are always top notch, always first class, and always safe. So I want to say personally, for me and my family, a thank you to all of you for doing those things.
Well said. Thank you. Moving forward, Rick Cook, Senator Runner's Office. Anything?
Thank you, Vice Chairman Little and fellow rest of the commissioners, City of Lancaster and staff. Created a brief report that was handed out to you. These are all new bills that were signed by Governor Brown between September 28th and October 11th. These are just related to criminal justice or laws that might be pertaining to what you do here. I do not propose to be an expert on each one of these bills, so if you have any additional questions, please contact myself or Russ Williams from the Assembly Office, where we can delve down and look at a little bit deeper for you. Some of these laws take place immediately, some laws take place January 1st, and some laws will take place July 1st. There's a few interesting ones in here, the fact that there's 3 brand new medical marijuana bills that were presented, yet there were no, going back to the California drought, out of the hundreds of laws that were signed by Governor Brown, there was nothing pertaining to the drought this year. So hopefully legislation will take place next year, which will pertain to the drought. Some are interesting for criminal justice. There's 2 firearms, concealed and gun-free zone laws that is on the last page, and it's a very interesting year that took place, and thank you, Dr. Brown, for pointing out we do like to regulate and put more laws on the books because we can't seem to manage ourselves very well. So please take a look at these. If you have any questions, again, you can contact Russ Williams at the Assembly Office or myself at Senator Runner's Office for any additional information.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Any questions?
Jim, I found this helpful and I appreciate it. It would be interesting to me, I could look it up, but if you could summarize it. Are you going to do this next month?
Well, they are on recess until January 1st.
We're in luck.
Yes.
So, but in the future, if you do this, I found this very interesting, but I would be interested to know what Senator Runner supported and opposed in the bills that were passed.
Oh, I would happily provide that for you.
Thanks.
That's not an issue at all.
Russ Williams, Assembly Lackey's Office.
Also prepare for you the information Assemblyman Lackey's support or opposition to.
Thank you.
As well. Just real quick, along with the information that Rick just gave you, I want to just real quickly share a little outrage from our Assemblyman about the governor vetoing SB 333, which would have restored felony charges for people in possession of the date rape charges, or date rape drugs. This was, once again, we realized that Prop 47, we can talk about that in a few seconds here, has created a lot of changes in things, and some not so good. This was an effort for the Assemblymen to try to correct some of the wrongs, some of the consequences because of the Prop 47. So I just want to share that with you. I also want to talk about his efforts. You know, Colorado legalized marijuana recently, and they never planned ahead for it. They knew it was going to happen, but they didn't plan for it. And they have found that they have seen a 32% increase in fatal traffic accidents related to driving under the influence of drugs, DUID. So the Assemblyman is working and did get this through with starting a DUID effort for UC studies in California to at least start a study to see how much impairment is involved with the use of marijuana. You know, we were very strong with alcohol in the 70s, thank goodness. Gave us lots of great information. That has helped us a lot. So now it's time that before it is voted into a law in California, or the legalization of marijuana, which will probably hit the ballots next year, let's get one step ahead of it and start the studies going on that. So he's working for that. And lastly, of course, Prop 47, as we spoke before. There's an interesting article in the Washington Post out right now that was regarding Prop 47 and how it has become the revolving door as for a lot of the criminals, and many of you already know this, that it's taken away, first off, any incentive for drug abusers to go in and undergo treatment instead of prison time, because they just know they're just going to be released, and the door continues on. The first time, the second time, the third time, the 30th time, it'll be the same consequences. They'll get arrested, they'll get released. And so it's we have seen an increase in crime due to that. So there's an interesting article somebody wanted me to point out to you from the Washington Post concerning Prop 47. Other than that, it's like I said, it's a time right now where, as the Assemblyman will say, California is safe because nobody's up in Sacramento. So, with the legislation. So.
Thank you, Russ. Any questions or anything? Okay. This part of the agenda allows an individual the opportunity to address the Criminal Justice Commission on any item not on the agenda. State law prohibits Commission to take any actions or items not on the agenda. Your matter will be referred to staff. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes. I have a couple speakers. Forgive me, Ralph Del Flippo? Flippo? Sorry, sir.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Ralph DiFilippo. I was a victim of a burglary on September 26th. It occurred at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I have a alarm system in my home, and Protection 1 called the sheriff at 1 o'clock. I was told, leave everything the way it is, which I did, except for the door, which I had to have repaired because it was kicked in. 8 hours later, the sheriff showed up. I find that inexcusable. Earlier in the afternoon at 4 o'clock, my neighbor's house was also broken into. 2 police cars showed up at his home. I witnessed that, and I told them that I had been burglarized just hours before. And they told me, well, we can't come to your house because it's not on we're not assigned that burglary. So that was kind of a slap in the face as well. I I've been trying to get in touch with the burglary detective since that time, twice with phone calls. I participated in a coffee with the sheriff, and I met Deputy Groupie last week, and he said he would get with the detective, and I'm still waiting. I don't criticize the individual deputies out in the field. They've got a tough job. In talking with them, they said they're undermanned for the amount of work that they have to do, as witnessed by what was presented. But I still feel that, as a citizen of Lancaster, that I deserve better response from our sheriff than I did get. I wanted to bring that to your attention, and that, you know, the citizens out here in Lancaster deserve better. That's all I have to say.
Have you been contacted, sir, by the Sheriff's Department at this point in time?
By the deputy,
Have you been contacted by the Sheriff's Department in regards to your matter?
they did show up at 9 o'clock that evening, but I've not heard from the burglary detective yet.
Okay, we'll pass that on for you. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could address that. I know, I don't know the specific details of how the call was typed in. We do have to prioritize our calls. And I know that there's times when a crime is occurring, of course, that's a priority, and it can be an emergency and gets immediate response. The calls that the suspects have are gone, and we believe them to be gone, becomes more of a routine call and becomes an follow-up investigation. As far as being contacted, I will definitely talk to you after this and look into it. And many times, if there is no workable information, you may not be contacted, ever, you know. But as far as when Deputy Groupie told you that he have the detective call you and you weren't contacted by a detective, I will make sure that happens, you know, and I will look into the specifics. But it is, there are days out there that it's very busy, and calls are sometimes do take, unfortunately, 8 hours. That's unusual. 8 hours response is very unusual for even a routine call, but it does happen from time to time.
Well, I can understand the priority.
Yes.
8 hours seems excessive, especially when two units were across the street from me. They couldn't come over to my house. And then the fact that I haven't gotten any response back. We've had a lot of burglaries in our area.
Well, thank you. I think the officer will get in touch and get your number and follow through. I appreciate it and apologize for your inconvenience, sir, but thank you for bringing it to our attention. Moving on, we have one other speaker card, Mr. David Paul.
Mr. Vice Chairman and Commissioners, good morning. Piece of good news, this commission is getting much better look and welcome. Thank you for what you've got yourself into. I'm not sure if it's all sunk in, but there's endless amounts of work and very little thanks. So,
David, there's two new people. Who are you talking to?
I also wanted to say something positive about
You didn't answer the question, David.
Michael Reeves. Happy birthday, Michael, and you made a lot of sense today. And to the gentleman who had your house broken into, I've had that happen. You feel terribly violated, and there's actually very little you can do at that time except tough it out. I feel for you. You know, I've told this story before, but I hope it's pertinent again. One of the proudest moments of my life up until then was when I was 16 years old. I was able to go into a liquor store in Greenwich Village and buy a bottle of wine. Now, I have two teenage sons, and I can guarantee you none of them will ever go into a liquor store and try and buy alcohol illegally. And the difference is they have a father, and I didn't. And Mr. DeRico, thank you for your truancy efforts, and I think that I would assume that the gains you make are because these children feel like somebody actually cares and is looking at them with concern, and that's what it takes. So some of these crimes are insurmountable if we don't get a handle on what's causing them. You know, I've talked about drunk driving for years. We have technology that will prevent drunk drivers from getting behind the wheel, but we have no appetite to do that. That's the real problem. It goes on and on and on, but we do the best we can. There was a very interesting thing. I saw just a piece of it on TV from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, and it was a commander who was talking about police lives, police feelings, police emotions, and how law enforcement can't just take this all and bottle it up and expect to produce good service to the community. So there are multiple issues here that we grapple with, and my God, I appreciate what you do, because we have to keep trying some of these things. When you were talking about the merchants, I was in Vallarta yesterday. There was a man and a woman in front of me in line. They showed their ID to get their 40-ounce bottle of beer. Every cashier I see in there is underage and new, so the training program to put all these people through that will be very onerous on the business. So I appreciate everybody being aware that we can put too much burden on our establishments. But my time is up. Thank you, and you're both very good looking.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Commissioner comments, anything? Dr. Brown, good? All right. Just a quick note in regards to the gentleman who had gotten broken into, and I've been fortunate to sit on the Antelope Valley Sheriff Board, which Vice Mayor Christ has brought a long ways in raising funds for our local sheriff's department, and watching the endless hours that these deputies put in, and Mr. Dorico, and constantly making this area safe, and the area that they have to cover. Unfortunately, when I hear stories like this, something slips through the crack, and I apologize to you, sir, because that is a burden. But I do know that looking and seeing that the officers and under the tutelage of Mr. Dorico, I see what they do to put the city first and make it safe, and you can see the endless hours. So I apologize to you, and hopefully it will never happen again. And I'm sure that the officer will get in touch with you, and hopefully it'll be rectified. So, but in response to our local sheriff's department, impeccable job what they do. You know, I have to admit they do a great job. And thank you, Vice Mayor. So, anything else at this point? Jen? No? Is it? Well, welcome. Welcome.
It's my pretty honor to be here, and looking forward to work with my fellow commissioners and as well as city staffs. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm excited also to be here, and I'm excited to do some work, not just sit here. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. At this point in time, then, if there's no other comments, I believe our next meeting is December 9th, so we'll adjourn to that time at 10 o'clock.
Take a picture.